All right, tonight we come to Genesis chapter 25. 50 chapters in the book, so we're halfway through, chapter-wise. Or will be, as soon as we get through chapter 25. Chapter 25 deals with the death of Abraham, the descendants of Ishmael, and then Jacob and Esau. There's a transition going to take place. We have been spending a good bit of time with Abraham. But now it's going to switch, and it's going to center in more, ultimately, on Jacob. And then as time goes on, we'll finally come to Joseph. And the book will end regarding Joseph going down, of course, into Egypt. So there's a lot taking place. We keep in mind that Genesis covers approximately 2,500 years. So a lot of time here. Abraham was thinking that as he was getting old, and he wanted to make sure that he had done what he should do in making sure that Isaac, the one of promise, marries according to the will of God and not a Canaanite. Ultimately, the Canaanites are going to be destroyed. And this seed line is what God, of course, is working out. And you can see a lot of things happening, the providence of God working even when men do not comply with God's will. God's will ultimately will come forth. God can even use the mishaps of men to accomplish His purpose. So Isaac gets his wife. We read in chapter 24. He was comforted after his mother's death. And so she has been dead now some 3 years. Then again, Abraham took a wife, and her name was Keturah. Now this is one that sometimes we don't know a whole lot about, seemingly. We know about Hagar, don't we? We know about, of course, Sarah, that was his wife. And Hagar was a concubine. But now he marries Keturah. So he took a wife, and her name was Keturah, and he's going to have more children. And she bare him Zimran, and Jokshan, and Medan, and Midian, and Ishbak, and Shua. All right, so Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born. He was 140 when Isaac married. He's going to live from this time here 35 more years. 35 more years. So he will be at the age, when he dies, of 175. I tried to put that a little bit in perspective to help us understand something. I noticed the comment that you had made. And 175, let's say if man lives to be 80 years of age, if you subtracted 35 years from that, what age would you be? 45? 80? If you live to be 80, you subtract 35 from that, I think you would be 45. So it'd be like today, if you had 35 more years to go, if you lived to be 80, and you had had these children then within that period of time from 45 up until whatever time you cease to having them. That brought it into perspective. That's not making, though, the 35 years perhaps correspond to what. Of course, the years were years. I'm not saying we're not talking about dog years here. They were actual years, but I'm just trying to put it in perspective. We don't live to be 175 today. And so I don't know what the average age in America is. It's higher than what it used to be. Yes.
I heard it. So it's not funny. There was this man, he was a runner. I think they said he was 115. Got hit by a car
Oh, wow.
running.
Wow.
That's something.
I told Sammy Williams the other day how to live to be 100, and he said, "How's that?" I said, "You get 99 and be very careful." So I think that man who was 115 should have been a little bit more careful out there and get run over today. That would be sad to live to be 115 and then get run over. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Oh, well, that's true. That is true. Still be here with us. Right. 24:1. Right. Yeah. Well, straight. Well, some people right now, Brother Tim's stricken at home, isn't he? And so he would be 140, right? That's getting on up in years. But you'll see also that the age has rapidly declined from the flood, time of the flood. Previous to the flood, you remember Adam lived to be 900 now and 60 years. Imagine that. 960 years. Methuselah, of course, longer than that. And but then after the flood, it started going down. Alan Webster mentioned some time ago that currently we're living longer than any period in history since the flood. Today we are. We have a lot of advancement as far as medical and taking care of ourselves and various other things, and so that's encouraging, I guess. But anyway, he marries. Now I find something interesting in 1 Chronicles chapter 1, verses 32 and 33, which is a repeat of the history of Israel, really, and goes back all the way to here. But it says that Keturah is a concubine. So what does that mean? What's a concubine? No, it's not a mistress. You're married. If you're using mistress in the sense that got another woman over here to whom you're not married. So it's not a mistress in that sense, because you remember Keturah, he married Keturah. I mean, married a
Israel,
right, not the same rank, if you want to put it that way. In fact, I think some dictionaries will say a concubine was looked upon as a second-rate wife. It would not have the preeminence nor the status of a wife like Sarah would have been. It's interesting that she's called a concubine when he's not married to anybody else, though. So be that. And there's some discussion that could be had on that. We got to keep in mind also, not everything is in chronological order. In fact, we're going to read of the death of Abraham here in just a moment. But come over, and he dies, and then we talk about Ishmael, and then we get into Jacob and Esau. And Isaac was how old? Look at 25:26. How old was Isaac when Jacob and Esau were born? 60. Okay. So how old would Abraham been at this point? If he's 60, how old was he? Abraham would have been 160 years of age. That means Abraham's alive at this point. In fact, Abraham will die when Jacob and Esau are 15 years of age. So he would have seen Isaac's children up until their point of being 15 years of age. Because what happens is we've got history going here, and then some events, and then he backs up. And so we go through the text and we see that. Especially we read of that in the Kings, when you're studying 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Kings. I'm sorry? Well, I used to hold on to that, but I've about changed my mind on it. Their commentators discuss that, because I kept thinking, how could he have all these children? in only 35 years, but that's very possible to happen. 35 years, you can have a lot of children. I don't know how. I'm sorry. Yeah, you could have 35. I don't know if you can still be married to the same woman or not, though. If you have 35, I that's right, 137. I think, and so
Just the 6 more here.
yeah, just the 6 more, I think, unless. Look at verse 6. This is interesting also. I'll just throw another clog in the turn here, whatever that means. But unto the sons of the what? Concubines, which Abraham had. So did he have more wives that are not listed?
Or is that calling?
That's right. That's right. I'm of the conclusion that it's Hagar and Keturah. Okay. So he's got children, of course, Isaac from Sarah, but he's got Ishmael through Hagar, and now then he's got these other children through Keturah. He's the father of many nations because they're going to be people, because Ishmael is going to have 12 princes. I find that interesting. So you think about all the descendants of Ishmael, which are still alive today in the Middle East. I really think that the Edom, well, I don't know about the Edomites because they were destroyed, but you have some of the descendants perhaps of intermingling of some of these, and they become what I think is today modern Arabs. Descendants of Ishmael and some of these that we're reading about here who are settling in that particular area. All right? So I find all of this interesting, and I don't know that I'm thinking Sarah has died because the Bible says, then again Abraham took a wife. Sounds like after these events. Sarah has died. Isaac has now taken a wife. By the way, he didn't marry until he was 40 years of age. Okay? And now then he has a wife, and then Abraham marries. So it seems like that's chronological, I think. And then it gives the sons of Midian, Ephah and Epher and Hanok and Abida and Eldah. All these were children of Keturah. And Abraham gave all that he had unto Isaac. Now, it doesn't mean he's completely out of anything now himself. And it doesn't mean he's not going to give other things to other people. But what do you think he is saying here? That's right. We might say a will. It's be like, whom are you leaving in your will? This person here. You give gifts to others. I think these, by the way, because you go back over to 24 and verse 36, it tells us again, let's see. If I remember 24:36 it is. And Sarah, my master's wife, bare a son to my master when she was old, and unto him he hath given all that he hath. All right, so he's getting the primary inheritance, which would have been a lot. Abraham got a lot of wealth. And I think that and as we come on here in verse 6, someone read verse 6 to us, please.
But Abraham gave gifts to the sons of the concubines which Abraham had, and while he was still living, he sent them eastward, away from Isaac his son, to the country of east.
All right. So he's separating these children from Isaac. He's going to keep Isaac because of the promise, in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. And he sends them out then to the east, and he gave gifts. It doesn't tell us what these gifts are, but most likely gifts to help get them started in their livelihood where they're going. It's not just, here's a gift, most likely. It's probably, okay, this will get you started, and it would probably be a substantial gift to each one of these as they are sent out. So he has a lot of children. And then he's going to have a lot of grandchildren. We center in on Jacob and Esau, but you think about all the other grandchildren that he had. And even today, there's a lot of different people in a lot of the world that claim kinship to Abraham. The Jews do. The Islamic people do. They want to trace it back to Abraham. We trace it back to Abraham spiritually through Jesus Christ being a descendant, you see. So, someone read now verses 7 through 9, please. Go through verse 9 also, please. All right. These are the days then of the years of life of Abraham which he lived. That's 175 years, as we put it in our way of numbering. 175 years of age. Abraham gave up the ghost, or gave up the spirit. This is another way of saying then the spirit leaves the body. The body without the spirit is dead. When later on Jacob's wife Rachel dies, it will say, as her soul was in departing. So that's what's happening here. An old man and full of years. That sounds like a very fruitful life, doesn't it? That's said also of David. By the way, David died at age 70. And it says that he was old and full of days. And I'm thinking, that's my age. So according to the Bible, I'm old. It's hard to refute that. I told one of my friends that the other day, who's about 2 years older than me. I said, even the Bible says you're old. And so, well, you can't refute that. But we're reading about a death of a great man, aren't we? But it's interesting that the Bible, it just mentions it and goes on. It doesn't have like chapter after chapter after chapter about it. And all of the hoopla you see in a person today who dies, and man, all new, if he's well known, all the news and the media and all of that is there covering it. But here's a great man. What would you think Abraham was noted for? What is his greatness? His faith. Now then, a little more specific, what would you say demonstrated his faith? He left Ur of Chaldees. Sarah had faith too then, didn't she? Okay. They were willing to sacrifice, and God blessed them, having a nice house in which to live, and yet they go live in tents. Anything else?
The faith to continue that marital bond to conceive the child, Isaac.
Right. God had told him at age 75 or a little before that he would bear a child. That took 25 more years, and so he continued in that marriage, and she did too, up until that point in time. And
That's what Paul references.
it is, isn't it? Right, not weak in faith. And so, anything else that demonstrated great faith? When he offered Isaac, his son, his only begotten son, Hebrews tells us, all of these things. And so he's walking with God. He's walking with God. I listened to something today, and I think there's a lot of truth to this. See if you agree with it. It's denominational guy, so he made some misapplications. But he said, hard men make good times. Good times makes soft men. And soft men make bad times. Now, when he says hard men, he's talking about people who have sacrificed, who were willing to commit themselves to Christ or to God and go through a lot of persecution like the Apostle Paul. And then the generation following him, that creates good times. Hard men who have sacrificed a lot, other people then stand on their shoulders, but that creates then good times. But now, once we get to good times, we've got it made, right? What does that create? Soft men, meaning compromising. And what this person was talking about were people like, okay, they're marketing religion now. And they began to go out and see what the community wants. Let's try to build this church by asking the community what you want. Rick Warren was one of the ones he mentioned in that, with some of that. And then Saddleback, or Saddle Creek rather. And so, but he talked about then, so they're willing to compromise the truth in order to get numbers. And that creates then bad times. And so we need to think about ourselves. We look at the Apostle Paul and others, and am I willing to stand? Am I willing to am I going to have a backbone of steel, or am I going to, see what people want and be willing to compromise the truth? Somebody had a hand raised.
Yeah, I was Joshua was willing to follow God in that whole generation.
Right.
He lived, they were faithful.
That's right.
But then once he died, then the fear of the judges came.
Fear of judges, known as the Dark Ages, right, of the Old Testament there. And you look in what happened in Europe, you remember when after Rome, after the persecution against Christians stopped, and they says you can now own property. You know what? They didn't have church buildings. They had cathedrals. And it became a lot of art and the church compromised, you see, until it drifted off into Catholicism and various other things. And so I think there's a cycle of that throughout. But I think that Abraham was a man who was a hard man in many ways. I mean, he was, I think Clifton may have brought this out. There's a difference between kindness and nice. Was Jesus always nice? He was always kind. But sometimes he had to say some things that some people would say is not nice, right? So we've got to preach the truth. And so, anyway, Abraham, good man. But then it says was gathered unto his people. What does that mean? He's not talking about his body. How are you gathered unto your people? I'm sorry?
What Jesus tells us in Luke 16, there's a place where our spirit is separated from our body.
I see it. So he's not talking about physically. He's talking about spiritually. His soul was gathered unto his people, which showed that those people still lived even though they were dead. And Abraham joins them, if you will, those who were faithful and served. So gather. That's said to about 6 different people in the Bible or so, that they were gathered unto their people. So when our soul departs, we go to be with the redeemed. You remember what David said regarding his son? I can go to him. He'll be gathered into his people, but he cannot come to me. And so that's another great thing. You remember when Job lost everything, and then he got double everything at the very end? How many children did he have originally? 10. All of them were killed, but everything now, materially speaking, was doubled, right, from that. But how many children did he get at the end? 10. Well, were they doubled? They were, because the 10 were still alive. You remember, again, Jesus says that God is the God of the living, not of the dead. He's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's the God of the living and not of the dead, meaning Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob still alive. And so we're going to move out one of these days of this temple here, but we continue to live. All right. Now, also interesting in verse 9, who is there to bury Abraham? Isaac and Ishmael. When's the last time we read of them being together? That's right, when Ishmael was mocking Isaac and was sent away. So I don't know if they'd ever been back together. I do know this, sometimes the death of someone in the family brings those families who have been apart back together. And so here, if they have differences, they're willing to lay them aside because they have a common thing to accomplish here, and that is to honor their father. And so they bury Abraham, and they bury him where? In the cave of Machpelah, which is interesting. The field which Abraham purchased of the sons of Heth, that where Abraham was buried, and Sarah his wife. And verse 11, it came to pass after the death of Abraham that God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac dwelt by the well Lahoroi. We read of that well earlier. With whom? Do you recall? In 16:14, that is chapter 16, verse 14. When Hagar was leaving, was departing from Sarah, and she thinks she's going to die, she winds up where this water is eventually found. God shows her where that is, and she calls it Bir Lahoroi, the well of Lahoroi. Also, we go to Genesis 24 and verse 62, the previous chapter, and we'll read that Isaac is dwelling there. Isaac dwells there, and Isaac dwelt by the well Lahoroi. That's in 1462. Now these are the generations of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's handmaid, bare unto Abraham. These are the names of the sons of Ishmael by their names according to their generations. The firstborn of Ishmael, Nebahath, and Kedar, and Abel, and Mibsam, and Mishma, and Duma, and Massa, Hada, and Tema, Jeter, Naphish, and Kedemah. Now, I have to be reintroduced to them as they made it to heaven if I go there, because I'm sure I didn't say those correctly. These are the sons of Ishmael, and these are their names by their towns and by their castles, the King James Version says. Another version says what? Encampments. All right. 12 princes according to their nations. So nations are coming from these generations. So I'm looking at just how much Abraham is indeed the father of many nations. That came true physically. All of those people. And God had told him. And by the way, had no children when God told him that was going to happen. And yet, we find that this does happen. Now, what is significant here, 12 princes, why is that? Does that ring a bell with you regarding Jacob? Jacob's sons become what? The 12 tribes of Israel, because Jacob's name is changed to Israel. And so you have 12 sons, or the 12 tribes that will come then from Ishmael. So I find all of this, to me, is just very interesting. I hope it is to you, because it just explains a lot about, if you were to look on a map and you see where people are dwelling in history, you're reading about it right here, how it all came about. And we will move on. We're going to get into something very interesting here a little bit later on with Jacob and Esau. And I think Jacob's name was appropriately given to him for a reason. He takes a hold of, even at birth, he takes a hold of Esau's heel. And he's known as the subplanter, or another translation, or a definition rather, will say the heel grabber. The heel grabber. So he grabs his heel. But the supplanter will get supplanted later on, won't he? All right, so stay with us on it. And I hope that it was helpful to you.